Right along, and going to try to tie into, let's see how effectively I do it, Laura's theme for the day, which is to deliver legendary service. So I'll read that again. It's all about the experience. With every experience, do the little things as well as the big things that surprise people. Go the extra mile to solve the problem. Create the wow factor that turns clients into raving fans. And so I'm going to share two examples to create raving fans and to deliver legendary service. The question is, what makes them tick that when what we do gives them that kind of reaction? And I had two instances where I call it shame on me a little bit of not quite really knowing how much the sensitivity to stuff. So Ryan Doherty's with CubeSmart. John and I have been working on CubeSmart for a while now, and working through the process. It's a project that had been previously approved with a set aside for parking spaces, and really all we're doing is just paving the parking spaces. It's already been graded out, pretty straightforward. And we had offered to the township, because the township staff had not seen the project before, we offered to the township just to have an update call, just to explain the background, so when they get, and all we have to do is a grading permit, so it was pretty straightforward. And so I set up a meeting. I've been East Whiteland. I've been literally East Whiteland for decades, and everybody, I know everybody there. The solicitor is working with us on Bernadette's the solicitor there, so a great working relationship with Bernadette. It's Zach, as you know. Zach has great respect for Nathan Little in the office and everything. So anyway, blah blah blah. So I scheduled a meeting, had to call, went over it. I was in the background, and later on, Ryan Doherty, our client contact, found out, and he was pretty upset that he wasn't part of the call. And at the time, I was like, I'm just explaining background stuff. It was really no big deal. This is kind of staff meetings that we have routinely where they're not necessarily client. Well, as it turns out, this project, which is fairly straightforward for us externally, you're paving a parking lot. Literally once we get through the technicalities, they could be done in no time. It's really not a big deal. The inside, the way the building was originally built, it's an office building that has CubeSmart storage in some of it. And they're converting some of that space because they need to move people. They're growing so fast, and they're back in the office enough now that they really need to add people into the office. And so there was always an expectation that sooner or later the self-storage would be faded out. It was kind of a demo for this area. Now we see these buildings with self-storage in them, that high-rise buildings in all the time. But at the time that this project came out, that wasn't routine. So they were trying to demonstrate that and have when investors came and everything. So there's a lot going behind it, blah, blah, blah. Well, I guess Ryan is under tremendous pressure from the highest up at CubeSmart over making sure this project goes and gets done on time. And since kind of piecing that together, I ended up having I had an email at 2 o'clock on Friday. Hey, can we have a call at 4 o'clock with the attorney to go over Zach had written a note that I knew exactly what he was saying. He didn't word it well, but he's so stressed that he had to have a call Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. It couldn't wait till Monday at 9. It had got to be Friday at 4 o'clock. And it went on, and he wouldn't get off. He kept asking over and over again the risk in that. So for me, recognizing, now seeing his stress point allows me, that's why I made sure to get on the call on Friday and to try to work on that deliver legendary service is, sure, Ryan, nothing going on in life. I'll be happy to do a 4 o'clock Friday afternoon call with Lou Calagreco scenario. So it was a learning experience for me, shame on that. But it was just a reminder of whoever your contact person is probably has to report to somebody. And I know that I've talked about this before, but I continue to see these moments where whatever their stress point is, we need to help them look good. The other one was Tony Giannotti. That's it's this all stuff with John. Now John's got challenging. He's challenging me all over the place here. Is on the Fred Beans, and Fred is a dominant character. He's a good guy. John normally he's kind of fun and happy, but he's exceptionally driven. I think Fred's like 86, literally, and he's buying dealerships all over the place. And he never stops. Tony is his real estate manager, so to speak. And Tony must have called me 3 times last week. When are we submitting? When are we going to meetings and so forth? And he's being pressured by Fred to give him a schedule for when the submission, Fred doesn't care at all about the submissions. The one thing he wants to know is when I open this building and what's going on. And you know, Tony's a key guy there, so it kind of caught me off guard. I was like, Tony, is it really the pressure that bad, so to speak, that, you know, you're kind of rattled by what Fred is saying? You're such a key person. How could that be? But he was clearly stressed over what was going on, and it wasn't that we were doing bad, but he wanted to be able to give Fred an answer right away. So if there were any questions, any doubt, and he wanted to let us know, hey, anything we can do to push it along. That's why, John, I was saying we have to get it on the schedule, and part of that's trying to deliver the legendary service. Is the feedback that Tony's giving us on what's happening there. So those are 2 examples of situations where direct contacts in people who I thought, you know, they're not novices to the game. I mean, they understand the game, and yet they were really stressed about the process that's going on. And so as time goes on, and some of that will be our contacts or our clients, and some of that will be contacts like Bernadette's under a lot of stress over there at Mount St. Joe's on the sidewalk issue and so forth. And so if we want to deliver the legendary service that helps Bernadette become a raving fan, we got to understand who's pressuring her and how to help her be successful. So there's this constant dynamic. You know, I talked about it. Is that, you know, we went to school for engineering, and how much time do you spend engineering versus all these other subtle things that are constantly going on? A lot of the ability to deliver legendary service is to figure out each person's what's making them tick and what stress they have. So, I mean, do any of you have, John, I don't know who you routinely contact. Do any of you have any, I mean, you know Rob, when Rob's on a roll. Now, it's hard to tell whether Rob's reporting to Peter or Peter reporting to Rob.
Interesting dynamic.
But, you know, in that case, they could have underlying contracts that we don't know about that it could be.
Well, it's even like Greystar, like there's investors, all are key parts to that. So that whole process was dealing with investors to make sure you could even move forward. So knowing that there's a different entity that does control the outcome is absolutely important.
So have the investors been involved in the discussion process and part of calls and stuff?
Not necessarily design oriented, but project went on hold and they had to get refunding, similar to Rob and Peter, if they wanted to continue down the new path to, you know, in this case is because geology dictated design. So there's a pivot on design, but.
Yeah, I think they said they had to go back, like once we did the redesign and was like, okay, this is what we're looking at. Greystar then I think had to repitch their I guess sale internally to, I think they said they're like finance board or something. So then we were waiting until they gave us the okay. So it's a lot of different levels in those larger companies.
You know, Brian, we used to go in the conference room right up on the board, the different players, and that item has become more and more prevalent. And I think part of it is how much it's costing now to do any type of job. The project we're looking at David's Bridal, and he was wondering a rough idea. We gave him a $30,000 proposal just for Paige to do the FEMA remapping and to just initial sketch support going to the township. You know, it's easily $300,000. And in all likelihood, before it's over, they probably have to go back and repitch to somebody else. I know we're talking about the Wawa Long Pond, we were just talking about that. we'll say $250,000, and it could easily see a situation where they have to go back to the Howe Group and say, hey, you know, here we are and where it's going. So that kind of loops around to trying to keep the two things are time, and then just making sure when we do our invoicing and contracting and everything, we're managing it in the way that they can understand how to do it, because there's this need to repitch on a routine basis. It just seems like just about anything now.
I know Keith and I are going through it right now with a builder. We'd been dealing, our contact was the architect for a project, and apparently the builder had his crews kind of scheduled for when he wanted to have them scheduled, and he actually went through or past us to the township engineer, trying to find out when his building permit was going to get issued, without realizing we get a review letter back, we had to resubmit it. You know, it's a process there, and his schedule wasn't really brought to the attention of us. Of this is when he needs stuff done. So then you get to start dealing phone calls from him, and now he's much more in the loop. But that was probably something we could have figured out. You know, asking the architect, is there someone else we need to be paying attention to here with their schedules?
You know, I think, John, that highlights in my mind there's just so many more levels of players these days, that being comfortable questioning what is the hot point, what are the buttons that are really key here. Do you have, you know, are you moving in, whatever. In CubeSmart's case, I think part of the complication is they have a lease at another location that's going to expire, and they need to be able to get going so that they can move them in before that lease expires, because you're in big trouble then. If that lease expired, where are you going to put the people then? So being comfortable with that. In Tony's case, it was just getting a better feel for the players, but trying to get better understanding of schedules and time frames is really important to it all. So I just highlight that it's kind of getting yourself more and more in tune to whoever your routine client contact is, so that you understand their sensitivity levels and things in particular that are going on. I say that with, let's just throw in another one of John's projects, which is Devereaux Brandywine. Bob Dunn's the chief financial officer, so he's the one as our contact. And I'm thinking, well, he's the guy, so what pressure? Well, the reality is that he's probably had conversations with the board, who he answers to, or to the president, saying, who wants to know when we're going to see our money. He gives them an idea. Hey, when we sell this, you know, we're talking to builders, and I might be getting us $200,000 a lot. And they put it together, and hey, that's $14 million. You know, that gets everybody motivated. The good news, that's good news. The bad news is they want it now rather than later. And so Bob's, you know, constantly worried about when it's going to get done and when it's going to happen is in a way a little surprising to me, the stress level, but it must be behind the scenes other things that are going on. So anyway, so I just ask you to kind of keep that in mind. It's constantly a developing situation, a comfort level of asking questions, of recognizing situations. Like I said, you know, shame on me. And some of it may be getting the builder. The way to alleviate is, John, as you're saying, that I should have Ryan at the meeting. Now you have that builder in the loop, so he or she feels much more in control of knowing where things are, type of deal. That's the danger of having an architect or an intermediary in between us. It definitely complicates things. So, but anyway, okay. Thoughts, questions?
Yeah, I think it's an external situation, but it's also really internal too. Like, if you get that information, we need to know as soon as you get it, or if you have information on it. Like, the internal expectations are just as important as the external expectations in order to like make the whole process smoother.
Well, I think, you know, the challenge to that is, candidly, for the five of you, is that you're relying on people like me to keep you in the loop, and just finding me is a challenge at times. And I say me, it could be Keith, you know, Keith, Jim, Paul, and I, we're supposed to be out. We're supposed to be on the call. And one of the things, because it's so complex anymore, we have, when I was involved, and I know it's a long time ago, is my boss on a day-to-day basis wasn't directly involved and I had the contact, but, you know, the plan sets were, you know, a site plan, a Wawa would be 5 sheets at best type of deal. And nowhere near the approvals and the layers and the complexity, and if we weren't done in 6 months, we didn't do something right. You know, the game's changed dramatically, so our role as the senior principals is to help kind of guide through that, so we're out running around all the time. But it is hard for the 5 of you to do your job if we're not keeping you informed. And so we're constantly doing that. That's why today, John, right before we came here, I went in to see Jim with John to make sure the 3 of us were on the same page. But your point's well taken, Brian, that it is complicated if we're not communicating. So a suggestion along that line would be to make sure you simply ask me, hey, what happened at that meeting? I think that just taking that proactive steps so that you're not having Greg shadow the car. John, like next week won't work. I need you working on it now, which is what I said to him today on Fred Beans. So, but excellent point, Brian. Very well taken. It is really hard if we're not communicating internally. Okay. Very good. Thank you.